Hello there, guys, and welcome back to my channel. Let me just try and fix why we don't have our names on screen. Here we are. Our names are back. Welcome to the first Premier League preview of the season. And I am drastically under-exaggerating when I'm saying I'm excited. I'm buzzing that football is back. Alex just told me he's kind of tried to not overdo it on the first weekend already and, basically already fry his brain immediately. Now, obviously, I approach football from a slightly different perspective to Alex, and I purposely try not to watch all the games because then I could just get too annoyed and bored of football, especially when all the other teams are better than us. So I try to focus on Chelsea for the most part, but finally, that's back. Now, obviously, the Euros was great. I'm not even sure if Alex watched the football at the Olympics because who the flip cares about
No,
that's the most ridiculous thing. Now, that's still a thing. It's almost as bad as breakdancing, but only almost. Anyway, different topic. I'm excited. Chelsea versus Manchester City tomorrow. Now, on the one hand, it's, I guess, kind of good. You get City out the way early. On the other hand, well, we're probably never going to be worse than we are on the first day, considering we have a new manager. He's only been here for 4 weeks. We've had a terrible preseason in terms of arrangements of time to train. So we're probably never going to be worse than tomorrow. But I guess you still get it out the way early. They have Rodri missing. Oscar Bob is now injured. I don't know. De Bruyne seems like he's not doing much, at least from the Community Shield. Let's see what happens tomorrow, obviously. But Alex, first of all, thank you for being back on. I appreciate it. Maybe it will be shocking to hear for you as well. Last time you were on, unless the last time I sent you a Twitter link was not the last time you were on, wasn't the 27th of December last year? So that is crazy how long ago it's been. So I'm very glad to have you back on. I'll start with a bit of a broader question. First of all, how do you expect Chelsea to perform? And maybe take a bit of a drag back to what happened the last few months as well, because we had Poch, we had a good end to the season. We finished, 4 or 5 points off top 4, finished 6th. Bit unlucky by City bottling it in the FA Cup final. That's why we're now in the Conference League rather than the Europa League. We would have been in the Europa League. When was the last time whoever came 6th didn't play Europa League? How unlucky do we have to be? Anyway, then we sack Poch. Then we get Maresca, who has not managed in the top flight anywhere, ever. Like, sure, he was the assistant of Pep, but he was only championship manager at Leicester and 14 games at Parma in the Serie B. So not exactly the most experienced manager. On top of not exactly the most experienced team, but a team with quite a bit of talent, maybe a manager with quite a bit of talent. What do you think?
Well, maybe the reason I wasn't on this channel, which is odd because me and you always chat quite a bit behind the scenes about Chelsea, was because I was quite a negative aura in the Chelsea discourse last season. Because from day one, I said Pochettino was not a good idea for this football team. So I think I'll be on more this season, I'd like to think, because I actually think Chelsea are going to do quite well. I'm pretty bullish on them. In fact, I mean, I know we'll do a Premier League prediction later, but I have already said it online. I have Chelsea in my top 4 at the end of the season, and I'm not the only one. So those who may know, I work at The Athletic. A colleague of mine, a good friend of mine, John McKenzie, me and him are also quite bullish on Chelsea. As not to say we're bullish on Enzo Maresca massively. It's not even to say we giantly rate Chelsea's strategy. I think it's harder to defend it, certainly over the last week with some alleged deals that might be happening. But basically, to sum it up in like a short sentence, I just think the majority of this Chelsea squad are going to benefit hugely from changing from Pochettino's transition-heavy football to Maresca's rigid structure, possession-based football. And I'm inclined to agree with you that you have a talented squad. In fact, I actually think Chelsea have one of the most talented squads in the league. And I'll go on further. I think they're the funniest team to laugh at the moment. Everyone's laughing at Chelsea because you're doing a lot of funny things, and some of those things you can't really defend. But in a way, kind of sleeping on them as well. This is still a team, I think, that are top 4 level. And that's where I've got them in the end.
I do sometimes think about that. Sometimes I'm like, do we just purposely do stupid things so no one considers us as being decent? Like, that's like, because, like, I mean, we'll get to Joao Felix in a bit, but, and a few others, I guess, John Duran just scoring for Aston Villa there, who we were supposedly trying to sign. Instead, we signed Kellyman, who no one had ever heard of and no one will probably ever hear of again. But, 19 million well spent. It's a really, really interesting one, isn't it? My few concerns are, And I want to get into a bit more on Enzo Maresca from your perspective as well, because while you did have quite, like you say, you are quite bullish about Chelsea being not as bad as a lot of people think, you didn't sound quite as enthusiastic about Maresca specifically. But for me, regardless of whether Maresca is now great or not great, it's still quite a drastic change of how we're trying to play. Now, sure, in the base setup, considering what Poch did at the very end of last season, Cucurella inverting, you had 2 in front of a 3. So I guess that was a little bit there to some extent. I don't know. But it's still very different. And when I go back to the last time we had such a drastic change from manager to manager, the last one that at least I can think of off the top of my head right now is when we went from Conte to Sarri. And we know how that went. Now we came third. We won the Europa League. But the Chelsea fan base was not happy. Now, sure, we've endured a lot worse since. So therefore, if we do the same, we'll be a lot happier about the same. But it takes time. Like these kind of system managers, they take time. It doesn't work from day one. And the problem is people always want process and progress, right? But progress is never just linear, progression. That's just not how it works. It's a step forward, a step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, maybe 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. That's how it's going to go. And I don't know when we're going to be as good as we will be under Maresca. Realistically, probably in 2 or 3 seasons, if he gets that long. That's probably when we'll be at our best under him. But where do you stand on Maresca? And where do you stand on a club like Chelsea hiring a manager that has, sure, won the championship and did a decent job there, but he won the championship with the team that was expected to win the championship? Which, sure, you still have to do it, but you were still the big favourite. So that makes it a little bit less of an achievement than, say, if Ipswich with McKenna did it. That would have been more of an achievement than Leicester doing so. So where do you stand on Enzo Maresca? His principles, do you see, obviously he looks a little bit similar to Pep Guardiola. Do you just see him as a bit of a Pep Guardiola minion, or do you see him as actually being quite drastically different? For me personally, just to inform you about what I heard before and then what maybe surprised me in pre-season is, like you said, very rigid. But then what I was happily and positively surprised by in pre-season is that he actually didn't always play the same shape. When I know some people tell me, he will maybe sometimes change it, but he already did much more of that than I expected in pre-season, in particular against Inter, when he all of a sudden turned up with a 3 diamond 3. And I was like, hold up. All of a sudden, none of our fullbacks are inverting. All of a sudden, they're playing right centre mid. How's that happen then? So that for me was even though I loved Sarri and I don't necessarily have a problem with a manager sticking to his principles, I do think in the modern football, with how Pep changes things, with how Arteta doesn't always do the same thing, if you have a manager now that always does the same thing and you have the kind of squad we do, without a Hazard to bail you out, without a Diego Costa to bail you out, I feel like it's just dangerous if you never change it up. So that's why I was glad to see that he did a little bit of that already in pre-season. But yeah, just let me know what you think and where you stand on him. And also, like, I'm sure even for you as an analyst and whatever, also for you with someone that hasn't had top flight experience, there's a lot of like unknowns for you. So I'm curious what you're intrigued to find out about Maresca as well.
There's 100 questions in there, but I will try my hardest to go through all of them. Okay, so let's start from basically what you started with, which was like the reaction to Maresca being hired. I got it to an extent. Like, sacked Pochettino, I think, quite hastily. Feel like it's a fair decision, but it kind of left with a small pool. I'm not bothered about Maresca. No, I think I'd be bothered to an extent about Maresca's lack of experience, but not that he done it in the championship. I think what matters is that he showed that he was willing to come in and play a certain style of football, and it's very clear the owners were looking for that. Yeah. So on that front, I think the hiring I'm fine with. I thought, okay, this makes sense. And that was basically what I said before, based off the fact that, Moises Caicedo said it during the summer. A lot of the Chelsea players, he hinted a lot of Chelsea players just aren't suited to the way Pochettino plays. At least he said himself that it was just running under Pochettino, where before it was a lot more of the ball. I think the biggest victim of Pochettino's style of football has been Enzo Fernandez, right? Because I think his biggest weaknesses are his physicality and his athleticism. Yeah. And in a Pochettino system, you're putting more weight on those attributes, and then I guess you're on the ball stuff later on. And obviously, for about 75% of the season, he put Enzo Fernandez as a striker for whatever reason. So yeah, I think
when you're playing counter-attacking football, you'd at least use Enzo's passing to spray those passes over the top. But no, we didn't do that either. Like you said, we basically played him up front. So he's like, how are you playing any decisive pass here? Only when low blocks are putting 10 men in their own box. And he's like, I don't care how good he is. It's difficult to find a pass when everybody's behind the ball in the box.
Yeah, I still haven't worked out an excuse for that period of time. But, okay, so judging on preseason so far, just like to build up to our general thoughts, I'd say I think it kind of, from what I've been reading about him, everything I've seen so far has made sense. So he's come in and said the defense is the biggest problem, right? And he said from day one, we're trying, like I've said, we need to reduce the amount of goals we've conceded. But that's not the only thing he's trying to change. Under Pochettino, Chelsea defended in what you call a zonal system. So you could clearly see they defended in a 4-4-2. Caicedo and Fernandez in that midfield too. And that was a broad system, right? Under Maresca, from what we've seen, he wants to defend in more of a man-to-man style of defending. It's not a zonal. And that's a big swing, a big change. Yeah. So from what I believe, at least personally, I think Maresca spent a lot of time on the training ground defensively on Chelsea's out-of-possession tactics, and he wants to nail that down first. So I'm not super worried to an extent I wouldn't be super worried about the goals going in. I know there has been a lot on pre-season because I think there's quite a seismic change he's doing. I also think from what the tone we've picked up, he seems like he's going to, if first few games Chelsea concede a bunch of goals, he will very quickly change and adapt. He just seems to be focused on locking down the defence. Right. Final part of Maresca, I think this is basically what I judge him by. And you mentioned before how I'm a little lukewarm on him. I think the structure he puts in is good, but kind of advice for you and all Chelsea fans throughout this season. I'd try and, as much as possible, avoid describing what you see by numbers. So you mentioned it earlier that you were excited when you were happy that Maresca changed things up in the game against Inter because he went for a 3-4-3 diamond. That is the easiest way to describe it, but
that's only kind of in moments of the game. We didn't do that the whole time.
Well, it's not necessarily that. It's that when you think of Pep Guardiola's team, you think of a 3-2-2-3, right? Like that sort of shape. But Guardiola doesn't go into the changing room at Manchester City and say, we need to line up like this. He says, I want my fullback to invert to create this overload here. I want my winger to drop in here to create this overload. I need this midfielder to push up. It just happens to look like that style of numbers. And what will be the defining thing for Maresca is if he's more like Guardiola in that way, or he's like other managers who I'd like to name, I don't know, one off the top of my head. It's a very, very rogue one, but bear with me. Bruno Genesio is known as Pep Genesio in France. And that's because all these teams, they always rigidly line up in a 2-3-5. So it looks like Manchester City, but they're only lining up like that because that's what the manager thinks is the best way to line up. It's not as much thought and intent behind it as to try and be okay, we're going to put these players here to exploit this weakness in the opposition side. We're going to line up 2-3-5 to get 5 attackers up front. So I guess there's a lot of there that's a bit dense in terms of analysis. But yeah, my general thoughts on Maresca are it would be good for Chelsea. He'll be able to last a long time at Chelsea if his principles are similar to Guardiola, where he's inverting a fullback because he wants to do something specific for that game, rather than if he wants to invert a fullback because Guardiola does it and inverting a fullback's cool and it will, it'll help us do that nice shape.
No, I do agree. I'm not sure how much you were able to, or maybe in hindsight, once he was hired by Chelsea, do your research on Leicester under Maresca, because like I say, from what I've gathered or also what I've been told, it was rigid is maybe the wrong word, but it was always the right back inverting into midfield rather than sometimes the right back plays almost as a right winger, sometimes he plays as here, sometimes plays as the right centre back. It was always one side inverted, the other side turned in as a centre back. And like I say, he hasn't necessarily always done that. How do you explain that? Is that for you, Maresca just improving as a manager himself as well? Is that, okay, now I have a very different kind of set of tools available to me at Chelsea with the players Chelsea have compared to what I had at Leicester? But also the level of opponents is going to be much more advanced compared to what he faced at Leicester. So at Leicester, maybe it was more of a situation. Okay, I'm just going to drill you to this one thing. By drilling you to this one thing, we will beat all these championship teams because we have arguably a better team than all of them. So that will work. But at Chelsea, we don't always have the better team, including tomorrow. So then there's probably going to have to be more thinking outside the box, I guess, to make shit happen. Or how do you view that? Or what was your view of Leicester on the Maresca?
Yeah, so I watched quite a bit of, I think it was like 10 games in the end of Maresca's Leicester, right? And like across the season. And I think if I'm going to optimistically, like my optimistic view of that and of what you said is why the system was quite rigid and there wasn't as much change. It's because he was able to steamroll the league. Like by December, they were on for record points totals. They were miles ahead of everyone else. Yeah. So I guess my optimistic view of Maresca would be like he struck gold with his system. There was no reason to change it.
Yeah. Why change the winning team, right?
Yeah, exactly that, right? And why I guess not necessarily concerns, because that might be the wrong word, because I had concerns over Pochettino, fears over him. I think over Maresca, it's more, I feel like they're going to do well anyway at base. But latter Leicester, second half of the season when I watched them, there were a few times where it did look rigid. I think stale was the right word. So it's not necessarily just like everyone's in their position. It's like a reluctance to move around. Again, we'll use the City comparison, right? You'll watch Man City tomorrow and you'll see players moving around to try and create like a 2v1 on the fullback or to try and open up a channel to get the ball into the striker. At Leicester, Maresca benefited from Vestergaard and Wout Faes, who were two brilliant ball-playing defenders for the championship level, who could just fire eye-of-the-needle passes into the block, and like Leicester can go from there. Once opposition teams started blocking that, their chance creation was a lot more stale. They were forced around the block and didn't create as many chances. And I think that's why they struggled in the second half of the season at times. So I think
how do you expect that to translate to Chelsea? Sorry to interrupt you on that, because do you think he will try the centre-backs to do the very same thing until the opponents also figure it out? Or do you think because it's the Premier League and the oppositions in terms of players but also managers are better from the get-go, we will from the get-go have to find various solutions, not just that one thing?
I think we've seen a bit of it in pre-season, the centre-backs trying that pass. I think he'll try and get that he'll try and get that working, and maybe it's a bit more of an automated pattern rather than, I think like Vestergaard, for example, he's just able to do it on the fly. He's a really good ball-playing defender. At Chelsea, he might have to create patterns for it to work a bit easier. But yeah, I think he'll know, or I'd like to think he knows that he can't do it. His defenders won't be as capable as Faes and Vestergaard were in terms of ball playing. Like, at least from the Chelsea defenders we've got, I don't think you'd say any of them are like capable of that eye-splitting pass after Thiago Silva's left, right?
I mean, the tacticos within Chelsea, they will tell you Levi Colwill does that. But I'll be honest, maybe at Brighton he did. I haven't really seen him do it at Chelsea. Now, so far, I'd still give him the benefit of the doubt that he was playing under Poch and half the time at left back. But so we're yet to see it, and obviously it was a short preseason. But I haven't really seen it to that. Like, he had decent passing in preseason, but not that kind of pass that you were speaking about there. So probably Colwill is the only one, if anybody. But I doubt it's anybody else. I can't lie. And that's my biggest concern with the squad anyway, going into the season. I'm not sure if you wanted to add something else onto Maresca, but if we just take it as a bit more of a, not just Maresca point of view, but also a Chelsea point of view in our squad. I'm sure you work for the Athletic, you know what's going on in the media. Everyone's laughing about how many players Chelsea have, even if, some of it is like, okay, well, they're not even training with us. So like, sure, they're registered, but it's not like we have the same situation as 2 years ago where we actually have 40 players in the first team building. They made sure that's not the case by just banishing players. Is that a good thing? Different discussion. But I guess it's better than having people in the corridors because there's not enough space in the changing rooms. So I guess that's one way of looking at it. But I think when you look at our attack, whether Joao Felix is added or Osimhen is added or neither of them is added, is decent. Like, I think Jackson had a surprisingly good first Premier League season, in my opinion. I hope he can build on that. If we don't get someone that plays in front of him, can Cole Palmer do the same thing again? I probably doubt that he hits the same numbers again, purely because the system is going to be a bit rigid, and also how likely is he, even if he had Poch again, how likely would he be to pull that same season off again? I don't think it's going to happen that many more times in his life. As great as I think he is, but last season was just outrageous. Midfield as well. I think everybody can agree that we have a good midfield. Whether it's now that we loaned out Ugochukwu, potentially a bit light in some areas and too many good players that all want to start. Again, separate issue. But coming to the defense, I'm like, they're all awful. No, that's an exaggeration. But we let Thiago Silva go, who at 39 years of age, in my opinion, was still quite significantly the best defender at the club. Now we let him go and we replaced him with Tosin, which is like, okay, brilliant. But it's a free agent from Fulham. He's not going to be Thiago Silva, is he? And he's also not going to come in to be a regular starter, I don't think. Maybe he starts tomorrow. We'll have to wait and see because Fofana's fitness situation is not quite clear. Is he ready to play yet after so long out, obviously, and Reece James being suspended and injured? But our defense is just my worry. I know what you spoke about, that Maresca wants to work on the defense as well. And that's why I'm intrigued to see, can he fix the defense with managerial work? Or will this defense need to be fixed by the owners and sport directors realizing, okay, sometimes you actually need to buy good players, not just young players. Because we were happy to do that in the past. We signed Enzo Fernandez for big money. We signed Caicedo for big money. Now, whatever you make of Mudryk, but at least we're willing to spend big money. Centre-backs, okay. Free agent, and who else did we sign? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not particularly blown away by it, and that's what I worry about. So when you look at the Chelsea squad, is the defense also the part you worry about, or is that more of a maybe me thing after how many goals we conceded in pre-season and also last season as well, obviously?
I think it looks worse than it actually is, maybe. I also think the Chelsea defense got exposed a lot last season during transitions. Like, you're often getting like just Moises Caicedo alone defending them while like the opposition team's charging at you. But I guess, like, compared on paper, like, for example, the attack, right? I've got Chelsea's predicted lineup on my screen next to me. Like, Jackson actually had a really good season last season in terms of XG, and Nkunku is Nkunku, Cole Palmer. The attack's really good. Midfield, I think, Caicedo and Fernandez, two £100 million midfielders. They have got serious quality. Romelu Lavia, I think, is quite strong in pre-season from what I've seen as well. So I think the midfield depth's pretty good. And then, defense, I think it's mainly because the Disasi and Badiashile, they're basically the statement signings in defense, as well as Wesley Fofana. I mean, Fofana's barely played. Disasi is going to have to adapt quite strongly in this system because he doesn't really suit a wide centre-back role. He'd have to be down the middle. And then Badiashile, I think, also has his own, like, he's still quite a young defender and he's still like improving. So it's probably like the most in progress side of the squad. I'll give you that.
For sure. Two things. First of all, what do you think of Chelsea signing Pedro Neto?
I'm going to be very clear. If Chelsea can keep Pedro Neto fit, I think it's a great signing. There's no real sign to dislike it. Really good dribbler. All numbers are great. Yeah, if he can stay fit, it's brilliant. Reason I was quite negative about this online is, I mean, I just don't really like signing injury-prone players in general. Like Man United,
especially when you're a club that has had serious issues with injuries. I feel like that is even more stupid then.
Right, Man United signed Mazraoui, and people were raving at his performance last night. And my brain just says, and this is just me, my brain just says, cool, that could be, one of 10 appearances he makes this season because of how bad his injuries.
It's like if Spurs signed Luke Shaw. It's like, okay, you got a good left back when he's fit. Ben Chilwell is maybe not as good a left back, but we'll maybe touch on that as well. But and the other one, Pedro Neto, unless you want to add something to that. The other one, our goalkeeper situation. We signed Filip Jorgensen, obviously from Villarreal. We have Robert Sanchez, who I don't particularly rate. We just have too many players with the bozo gene. I would love if we had more players that were just didn't have that. Like Badiashile, you mentioned in there. He's a good player. He can pass, he can defend. But the problem is, at least once a game, his brain just switches off for a good 2 seconds. And that same thing happens to Robert Sanchez every game. Like, he might be a decent shot stopper. He might even be able to pass decently. But at least once a game, he has a bozo moment. And if you do that and you have a young attack, I just fear we're going to run into similar issues to last season where, okay, we're probably going to score 1 or 2 most games. The question is, are we going to have 2 bozo moments to concede 2 stupid goals most games? And then we'll have too many 2-2 draws again, just like last season. That's the part I'm kind of worried about. So where do you stand on our goalkeepers? Like, because I don't know, man. Like this is like the goalkeeper. Like obviously, I guess I include the goalkeepers in what I said about the defense a minute ago. But the goalkeepers, if you look at them individually, how are Robert Sanchez and Filip Jorgensen top 6 team goalkeepers? I don't understand.
Yeah, when you ask me about, let's talk about the defense across my mind after. Actually, that's not the weakest part of the squad. Goalkeeper is the only area of the squad where I actually think it's just like not good at all. Don't think that's top 6 level. Like you said, I don't like Sanchez. I don't think he's good on the ball for a possession-based side. And Jorgensen seems like a bit of a gamble. Maybe he does turn out to be good. But yeah, for Petrovic, Sanchez, and Jorgensen, like all 3 of those players, yeah, for the money Chelsea, this goes further back, to be honest. Like Edouard Mendy, there was a time people said he was like the best goalie in the world. He was always pretty good shot stopper, terrible with his feet. Kepa Arrizabalaga was always great with his feet, terrible shot stopper. I like this isn't. I don't even think this is a current.
That's why I'm honestly a little bit surprised. Going into preseason, I thought watch Maresca use Kepa in preseason, realize actually he's better than all the others with the ball at his feet, so I'm going to play him. It turns out we never even included him in training, and he was training separately from the get-go, and we still haven't found him a new club. But I still think if Maresca was allowed to use Kepa, that would have happened. I still think that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah,
which I wouldn't have liked it either because the fans are just too against Kepa that another goal would have been a good idea, because from day dot we would have been speaking about we'll concede 1,500 long shots again, and we probably actually would have conceded 1,500 long shots. But yeah, it's a bit of a mess, the goalkeeper situation. I genuinely don't understand what they're doing. I'm not sure if as a non-Chelsea fan you were able to quite follow it along like chronologically as much, because last summer we had Kepa. Then the reports were that Poch is going into the season with Kepa as his number 1. Then we signed Sanchez to supposedly provide competition to Kepa. Then all of a sudden we got this offer for Kepa from Bayern Munich with the Manuel Neuer injury and them selling Jan Sommer. Then we were like, okay, maybe. And then all of a sudden Real Madrid also gave us a loan offer, and Kepa was like, well, Real Madrid, I want to go there. So then we allowed him to go. And then very last minute, we had to figure out, okay, now actually Sanchez was supposed to provide competition for the number 1. Now Sanchez is all of a sudden the number 1, and we need a new number 2. So then they signed Petrovic. Sanchez turned out to be pretty awful for the first half of the season, then gets injured. Then Petrovic plays. Sure, not great with the ball at his feet, but everything else, considering he was a guy that we took from the MLS, I thought he did surprisingly well. And then we finished the season, and the guy that did surprisingly well, who we signed literally a year ago, we're trying to sell again because now he doesn't suit the manager anymore. And this is where I'm like, people like the Clown Lake sexuals, as I like to call them, right? They defend everything they do. I'm like, how can you sit there and say there is a plan when you bought a goalkeeper, when you supposedly only ever wanted Poch for a year or 2 and then always wanted to go to this kind of manager? Well, then why sign a goalkeeper that isn't good with the ball at his feet? It just blows my mind. And then, we decided, okay, we don't want Petrovic anymore. So now they signed Jorgensen with the same wording again, to provide competition to the number 1. So now I'm expecting at some point in this season, Jorgensen will probably replace Sanchez. And the next season, we'll probably sell Sanchez and then buy someone to provide competition for Jorgensen. And it will just be an infinite loop until they finally grow a set of something and actually buy a good goalkeeper. Like you were saying it there in terms of, I think you were trying to get to that. With how much money we spent on all these individual average goalkeepers, we could have easily just bought one good one.
Yeah. That's basically what I'm saying, yeah.
So it's like 3 years ago, I didn't even want Diogo Costa. Now, I would flip and bite your arms off with Diogo Costa. Do you know what I mean? That's how the standards have changed, man. But yeah, I don't want to get too hung up on the goalie situation. I had a comment here from Shazib. I'm going to call you. Sorry for butchering it, bro. He asked, Alex, do you think that we would have been better off appointing McKenna or Thomas Frank?
No. I think you would have had it would have been similar sort of ideals to Pochettino, transition-based football for a squad that's not suited to transition-based football. I think Maresca is a step in the right direction. Yeah,
and obviously it's media brief, so who knows quite how true it is. But supposedly we held conversations with McKenna, we held conversations with Thomas Frank. So it's again, I'm questioning the plan, because if you realize it, if I realize it, if Connor Holden, I'm sure you know him, the chat.
Oh yes, he's great. Yes,
if he realizes, how can the board not realize that? Okay, we're looking at different managers, but we're looking at very different ones, so it doesn't really sound like a plan. Like again, it's like, how can you look at 3 different managers? One of them makes sense, 2 of them don't make sense at all, and you expect me to believe and back your plan? How am I supposed to buy into it?
To be fair, I can't speak as much as Thomas Frank, but I've been looking a lot at Ipswich over the summer. I can understand why any club would look at Kieran McKenna. Like, the more you look into what he's done at Ipswich, like, the more stars the thing is. He obviously got double promotions, but like, obviously make this quick. He got double promotions with Ipswich. You'd think, okay, like, they came up last season in the Championship and they probably had the money to spend big, or they've got new owners. They had like the 14th highest valued squad. Like, he got a team promoted from League One and it took a mid-table level Championship side to second with over 90 goals or something like that. So I can understand why a team would look at Kieran McKenna, because he seriously looks good.
No, and I understand that as well, like from that kind of perspective. But if you're all about supposedly data driven and this and that and this and that, and you're like you build a squad to play a certain kind of way, and then you want the manager that does a certain kind of thing. Like, weird question: how different do you see Graham Potter and Enzo Maresca? Like, do they have certain similarities, or are they completely different for you?
I'll be honest, I could barely remember what Graham Potter was like.
Fair, but I'm just thinking we already had kind of this ball playing weird kind of fullback inverting whatever kind of manager 2 years ago, but then we sacked him and got Poch instead, and now we're back. So it's like, again, where is the plan? GM20 seems to be really adamant to want to ask you this question. He sent it a couple times in different wordings. Can we stop counterattacks with a midfield of Caicedo, Enzo, and Lavia? The asterisk here should be they're probably not all going to play together, but that's certainly has been our biggest issue in preseason and also last season, stopping counterattacks. Like, the more we commit to trying to get a goal, especially against low blocks, the more we just run into silly counterattacks because someone is out of position or someone messes up the aggressive tackle. And also, I mean, that's not what GM20 asked here, but you touched on Enzo and Caicedo earlier being two £100 million players. A lot of Chelsea fans have had the worry that can they even play together to the level of both looking like £100 million players. So I guess with the question bringing up the midfield, even though you're touching it already earlier, where do you stand on that? Stopping counterattacks, Enzo and Caicedo working together. Where do you stand on all of those?
I think when we look at this question, like, can you stop a counterattack with like these three players? You think of like I don't know, a team attacking these guys in transition, or like in a large area of space. I think you can stop counterattacks with them. Maresca's attitude to it will be, and it seems to be based off what we've spoken about, he wants to nail that out of possession system. So you're not even considering counterattacks. You're losing the ball and you're winning it back quickly. And I think that
won't always work, no matter how good you're off the ball.
Yeah, it won't always work. But if you have a good rest defense with, like, he has a 3-2, right? Well, like, generally maintains like 3 defenders and like 1 or 2-ish midfielders, like at the back. Then that seems to generally be enough nowadays to like contain most counterattacks. And like, if anything, Chelsea will probably be vulnerable in the channels, so that's kind of away from the midfielders. Generally, I think Enzo Fernandez, Caicedo, I think they can play together. I think they played together as 8s. I think Enzo can play in the 6 as well. I don't exactly know his best role yet, but there's basically 4 slots in this midfield. I think you could get both of them playing together well in it. Oh, I believe you've frozen, unless I have frozen. Chat, can you let me know? Oh, looks like Laurenz is dead. Okay, I'm running the stream now. If I'm not and my internet has died, can you? Well, no. Leave a comment to let me know if if Laurenz is gone and it is just me. In fact, while he's back, I will just answer the questions, and I'll be looking at my WhatsApp to see a panicked Laurenz. R.I.P. It's me. Laurenz said he'll be back in 2 minutes. Okay, yay, right. I've got a bit of a delay on the chat. Ask me any Chelsea question. It's my stream now. Max F says just you, Alex. That's whereabouts I'm at. There we go. Yeah, everyone's saying it's just you. Quick, you better fire your questions in before he comes back. I mean, generally for now, I'll say I am quite bullish on Chelsea, as I said. With the midfield, what was I saying as well? Yeah, I think Enzo Fernandez, I don't really know if he fits best as 6 and 8. The problems with having him in as an 8 is like he might not be as strong in the counter press. Problems with a 6 is he might not be close enough to goal to do damage, but I think you can make it work. Okay, Max says ideal striker for us, in your opinion? Osimhen would be ideal striker because then I think Chelsea are going to struggle in attack at times this season. If you fire crosses in, if your left firing crosses in is your best hope, Osimhen is the guy to finish that. So Osimhen is the best one. EPL Turf says, what's your midfield for Chelsea? I think it depends on the game. If you're going against lower opposition sides, you could probably get away with Palmer in the 8. I'm reluctant to say Nkunku in the 8. I think you'd want him as a striker. I think generally a Caicedo, Fernandez, a Lavia Caicedo Fernandez midfield can work, but maybe against worse teams, you go with Fernandez in the pivot, and then he's paired with someone, and then Caicedo and like Palmer in the 8. I think you can get away with that. Alex, do you think Maresca can win trophies with us? This is kind of not to go super on with it because I haven't got much time to answer these questions. I think if he can nail the in possession stuff as well as Guardiola can, or that's a silly point. If he can nail the in possession stuff and it's not just I want to get my players in a 3-2-2-3 shape and that will be enough, then I think he can win trophies. Thoughts on Felix? I'll save that because Laurenz is going to talk about it. Slot is a better fit for Liverpool or Enzo for Chelsea? Oh, good question. That's tough because I think Chelsea have been so much turnover. It's easier to see why slots. It's easier to see the fit for Liverpool slot, I guess, just in terms of he's quite similar to Klopp. Like they're both two managers who don't mind playing transitional football, whereas Chelsea have kind of gone like big left turn to Potter, big U-turn to Pochettino, and another big U-turn to Enzo Maresca. So it's hard to say, but I think broadly both managers are good fits. Okay, what's next? Is Broja and Lukaku still at Chelsea? I don't know, probably. Do you think Enzo Fernandez can be successful at Chelsea? I feel like I kind of already answered that EPL turf. But I say generally yes. I'm still quite bullish on him. I still think he's a really talented midfielder, and he's just kind of suffered under Pochettino's style of football. So I think you put him in a possession-based style of football, a rigid system where he knows he has a better idea of where players are around him and he should have more time on the ball. I think that's when you start to see Enzo Fernandez thrive. I will say, if he doesn't do well this season, then I'm kind of running out of excuses for him. I feel like he has to exist. Obviously saying that, if Maresca's style of football is a success, but Fernandez isn't good enough, or is still struggling, then I'm running out of excuses. Thanks, Alex. Do you like Palmer right wing or 8? Now, Palmer's a tricky one. I think he's one of the few players who might struggle to adapt to Maresca, and that's because I think he thrived under Pochettino's chaos style of football, because Palmer is just really good at making decisions quickly on the ball. He's clearly got a high level of football IQ. So in those chaotic moments in counterattacks, he just makes that decision a little quicker than other people. So
I'm
Palmer,
back.
very good.
Can you hear me?
Excuse me, I'm answering the question. I guessed. No, don't take me off. I'm answering the chat. I can hear you, yes. Oh, have you gone again? Has he gone again? Do we get to keep answering questions, guys? I think he's gone. Laura said he did message me saying he's just rebooting the router. So I think he's having internet problems. I will say, no worries, just running the stream.
So for some reason, Alex, seemingly the chat can see me. Oh,
Alex, you're back.
I'm back. I just need to do one thing. My apologies, guys. But Alex, thank you. You seem to keep the people here, so I appreciate you. Can you tell me what were you talking about? Just so I have an idea.
I was just going through the questions in the chat. I said, if you hurry up, guys, I'll be able to answer all of your questions until Laurenz comes back. But now you're back, so we'll have to return to the running order. Unless you have disappeared again. I think you're still here. Oh no,
yes,
he said he's got to go for 2 minutes. Oh, you're back. There we go.
Yes. Can you hear me properly? Because it seems like there's a little bit of maybe lag. I hope we can figure it out.
Yeah, you've got a little bit of lag.
Well, I'm not really sure what I can do about this now, so I hope it fixes itself, because what can I do? I can't really I already rejoined, didn't I? Okay. I think we spoke a lot about Chelsea, Maresca. Let's actually take a little look at the first game tomorrow, because we speak about, Chelsea should do quite good. Chelsea this, Chelsea that. But we don't just play anyone tomorrow. We play the best team, in the world. Could Real Madrid actually be competition for City in that sense now with Mbappe up front? Who knows? But essentially, we're playing the best team in the world. So, Alex, how much of a chance do you give us against Man City?
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. I started every question by saying, I'd say that I'm kind of expecting Chelsea to lose, if I'm honest. Actually, I'm torn. It really depends on how Maresca approaches this. If he tries to man-mark City, I think Chelsea are far away from being able to go man-to-man with, as you said, the best team in the world. So they might get punished. But if Maresca recognises that and thinks, okay, on opening day, we just want to get a conservative result, I think he'll try and lock up a bit. And obviously, City are missing Rodri. I think they'll also lock up a bit, mainly because they've had a transition problem the last year or so. And last week in the Community Shield, they were conceding like really dangerous attacks, like way too easily. So, yeah, I'd say I'm thinking 50-50 between Chelsea getting absolutely hammered or like a cautious 0-0 or 1-1.
I mean, I take it. I really like. Obviously, I take a 0-0 against City. I take any kind of point against City. But if we get a goalless game, that would be frustrating. I'm like, bring back Potts. Give me all the goals. Do you know what I mean? Because that was the one thing about Chelsea last season. It was very rarely boring to watch us because boy, did we make things interesting. But yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? Like, City are missing Rodri, and you're like, okay, they're probably replacing him with Mateus Nunes, or however you pronounce his name, or who are they putting in the midfield instead of him usually?
Kovacic
as the Rodri.
I think so. Yeah, that's what predicted lineup says.
Well, honestly, I think we should win then because Kovacic is terrible at that. Judging from what I've seen of Mateo Kovacic, they should not be doing that at all. So Chelsea, come on now, fix up. We should get it done tomorrow. Now, on a serious note. It's so difficult to judge because when you're saying, okay, yeah, last week in the Community Shield, they conceded so many goals on the counter, and I'm like, in a way, we're not. I'm not saying we're bad at that. If anything, we should be good at that because that's what most of the players are still used to from Poch last season. But I still, even against City last season on the Poch, like in that cup semi-final, like we have counterattacks and then we just don't play them out properly. And I think that's mostly down to the lack of experience within our attack, that we don't play these types of counterattacks or attacks out properly. How much, and this is a weird question, how much do you think these players that last season we deemed as also inexperienced, and rightly so, how much does 1 year together and also in the Prem and at this level help them to be, well, less inexperienced when we come into this season? Like, how much of an impact does that 1 year make?
It's a good question. I mean, I haven't got like a sure answer, but I do think it makes a difference, but that is also somewhat negated by like the constant churn at Chelsea. I will say though that I was watching West Ham Aston Villa today, and like Liverpool today as well, and I feel like you saw both teams start with trying to employ the principles of their new managers, and then when they were struggling in their second halves, like Liverpool became a lot more direct, which is something we saw under Klopp, and West Ham also became a bit more direct as well, a little more like Moyes in their second half against Villa. So I wouldn't be surprised if Chelsea kind of reactivate their counter-attacking genes or their transitional genes from last season if things aren't like to exploit weaknesses against City.
There you go. Why don't I bring up, it likes to call itself tactics board. I think it just likes to be fancy this way. How do you think Chelsea... Well, I'm not going to ask you how do you think Chelsea will line up because even I don't know. Like I told you this before we went live, I have no idea who's going to play up front tomorrow. Could be Nkunku, could be Guiu, could be Jackson. Not a clue. Like absolutely not a clue. And I've only so far put it down in the 4-3-3. How do you think Chelsea should line up tomorrow, but also more broadly speaking? Because so if you want to say, okay, when he's fit or, not suspended Reece James or whatever, you can. Because I have a few... I still don't fully know how we're going to get Pedro Neto, Nkunku, Palmer, Enzo, Caicedo, and potentially Lavia, because he was arguably our best player in preseason, all in the same team. And the answer is we won't. But how do we keep them happy by playing Conference League? Like, I doubt it. So that's kind of part of my concern. And on top of that, we might be adding Joao Felix into that, who to me is kind of just like a worse Nkunku. I don't know how you see it, but to me, it's just the worst Nkunku. He's not really a winger. He's not really a striker, but Nkunku is better at being a striker than Joao Felix is. It's not really a 10. At least Nkunku seems to be able to play an attacking 8. I don't really believe that Joao Felix should be doing that. But yeah, so where do you stand? And obviously, who do you think is the better goalkeeper of the two we have? I assume you think Sanchez because you said that Jorgensen is a bit of a gamble.
I've not seen much of Jorgensen, so I do not know. Let's go through.
Go with Sanchez and we'll
a couple of quick points. So I'm glad you invited me to pick players who are fit. I will still not be picking Reece James because he's never fit.
Yeah, but hey, for once compared to last season, he's our only unavailable player, both due to injury and suspension. Everybody else is fit, and that for us is quite mind-blowing. I can't lie.
Yeah, it's just a shame he's permanently unavailable, isn't it? He's just your Ledley King.
Thank God we signed Gusto, is all I'm saying.
Yes, good thing you signed Gusto because he should play. Point B, Joao Felix. Yeah, even if you do sign him, I just don't understand.
Don't get into that too much. I want to get into that as its own topic in a minute. Sorry.
Okay. I'll hold that. Final point was I think you don't really have a best 11. I was kind of saying this while holding it down while your internet was having a meltdown. I think the benefit of Chelsea's squad is that you can kind of change it for who's like depending on the opposition. So, for example, tomorrow you're playing City, right? Do you want me to go through this slowly or quickly? Because are you going to write the names on screen as I say them?
I'm going to write the names on screen, but I can follow along. So don't be too slow, but yeah.
I'd probably go in Augusto, I guess a Fofana if he's fit, Colwill and Cucurella backline.
Yeah.
Yes. And then I'd be having a Lavia, Caicedo, Fernandez midfield.
Interesting. Okay. Would you put Lavia as the 6 or Caicedo as the 6?
I would be probably putting Lavia as the 6.
Okay. I mean, I agree. I just wasn't sure if you'd agree as well.
Yeah, so good. But, Lavia as a 6. And then this is very similar to the predicted lineup on FOTMOB, but where I'm going to differ is I'd have Nkunku up front and Mudryk on the left and Palmer on the right.
Is this what you think we should be doing specifically tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay.
But not specifically
we just don't know whether Pedro Neto can or should start tomorrow, I guess. So,
I mean, goodness, those. But I assume you're going to be betting him very slowly, which
I assume he's going to come off the bench. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, this isn't like specifically for Manchester City. It's just specifically for top level sides. You probably want that midfield three, I'd say. But what I'd say the benefit of Chelsea is that when you're playing weaker sides, I think you can get away with a Fernandez in the pivot, a Palmer in midfield as the 8, and then like you can probably get another winger in like a Madueke in, right? So
sorry to interrupt you quickly, because you've said obviously you managed to catch up on all the preseason games of the top 6 teams, which obviously thankfully still includes us. Good. Let's see for how long, but for the time being it does. And that's my issue, because a lot of people, like including Connor, you mentioned him earlier, he also said play Enzo as the 6. Hasn't happened yet. We haven't seen him try that yet. We've seen many things. We've seen Nkunku as an 8. We've seen Palmer as a winger, but then all of a sudden, like he changed it up and let Palmer invert, or we have a free role, I suppose, and let Gusto provide the width out on the right-hand side, and not do the whole inverting fullback thing anymore, but to actually allow Palmer what he likes to do rather than being a touchline winger, which he just isn't. So that part makes sense. But like, why would you want Palmer to be a touchline winger? You're just making Palmer not as good as he could be. But then now imagine, and I don't think it will happen anymore, that Chelsea will sign Victor Osimhen, because the PSG's injury to Gonzalo Ramos now, and the likelihood that they just pay whatever Napoli are asking, in my opinion, is quite big now. But imagine if on top of what we're already dealing with, and okay, you play Nkunku up front, because I don't think Maresca is in a position to be allowed to not play Nkunku when fit. Like, and what is he going to do? Like, drop Osimhen? No. So how are you going to squeeze Nkunku and Osimhen and Lavia and Enzo? Okay, Lavia maybe it doesn't have to start as such. But yeah, I mean, you didn't mention Caicedo as the 6 there when you said, when you play Leicester teams do this. You said Enzo. What makes you say that, and why do you potentially think Enzo Maresca hasn't done that yet? Like, is it just the early stages and that's why he hasn't done that yet? Or like, do you think he might actually never do that, which would be surprising to seemingly you as well?
So it's like a clear distinction. I wouldn't put Enzo Fernandez as the 6. I'd put him as a 6 because it seems very clear that Maresca is going to continue inverting a fullback.
Yeah.
And in that system, like if you were to drag a fullback in, right? Let's say you can drag a player in right now, can't you? If you could drag Cucurella into invert into midfield, and let's put Fernandez next to him instead of Lavia. Let's just swap those around. We can imagine Lavia as somebody else, right? Like when Chelsea are going to go forward. Like their 2 8s are going to go forward, obviously. You kind of get that sort of front 5.
I just turn him into Nkunku and turn Nkunku into Johnson.
Oh, I wouldn't turn him because I wouldn't play Nkunku as an 8. But we could touch on that in a second.
Well, who else do we play in this position then?
I don't know, like Palmer. Who you've got loads of players. You can find one. Come on.
Loads of players, he says. Yeah, not loads of good ones.
You can play Palmer and then like a better week. Anyway, so what I'd be saying is that Fernandez on the ball, he's going to be a little more advanced than Cucurella. And Cucurella would be, this is kind of what happened at Leicester as well. Like you'd have one of those pivot players just be a bounce pass guy, like receive the ball, bounce pass it out. And that's kind of luring pressure in and relieving it off Enzo Fernandez. So he'd have that room to spray passes. It's also, and the reason I like Caicedo in the 8 would be for counter-pressing reasons. Like we just discussed that Enzo Fernandez isn't like physically, like isn't his strongest suit. I don't think like this is a 1-to-1 comparison, but for example, you wouldn't put Jorginho as one of your front players when you're pressing, would you? No, you'd have him behind other physically adept players who can cover for him, and hopefully they win the ball back. Caicedo is that more physical, aggressive player. So if you lose the ball, I don't know, just in front of Jackson, you want Caicedo jumping onto that rather than Enzo Fernandez. So that's why I'd have Fernandez as a 6. I'd never have him as the deepest midfielder, I don't think. You'd want him that room to kind of, that license to go forward. But it's also why I'd be a little, the only time you'd play him as an 8 would be against like a team like City, where you probably aren't going to be as aggressive in your counter press and you're going to be happier to drop off a bit.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we've played him as an 8 every preseason game. Now, like I say, obviously the Inter game, we had a bit of a different setup and shape. But yeah, it's an interesting one. One other thing I want to touch on is this guy over here. I really like Levi Colwill. You know, the other person for this position, I guess, would be Badiashile when you're looking at them being similar, right? I don't think either of them is particularly good at defending wide spaces, which for me has been a big worry for the whole time. Oh yeah, I forgot he exists. Dewsbury Hall could play, but you know, I don't think he will play much because he was about the signing, in my opinion. I will ask you about him as well. But anyway, Colwill and Badiashile, I don't think they're great at defending wide spaces, which is partly why I think in the last preseason game that we played, it was actually Cucurella that came inside to play as the inverting centre-back rather than being an inverted midfield. Obviously, last game, we played a bit more one of these ones, if you want. Like you touched on earlier, we shouldn't necessarily always look at, this is the formation you played. Fair point. But just to, you know, make it visually, to explain it to people. Where do you stand in this comparison? Like Colwill defending wide spaces compared to potentially, rather than inverting Cucurella, making him defend the wide spaces, potentially allowing Gusto to invert them from the other side instead then, or I guess doing what we did against Inter. How important do you think this defending wide spaces is for this kind of wide centre-back here? And how much help from the players ahead of them do they look for, do they need?
I think you should be willing to give Colwill another chance defending wide spaces. And that's because, like, it's one thing defending wide spaces like a wide centre-back. It's another playing fullback, which is what he did under Pochettino, right? And I think that you're going to be put in harsher situations. Like, as an outside centre-back, sure, you might be drawn wide, but I think you're kind of always going to have... You're going to be able to see more of the pitch in front of you, right? Whereas a fullback, you're more likely to be trapped 1v1 with a winger more often and be like right on the touchline. Yeah. And I think a lot of centre-backs will struggle with that, even the most talented players in wide areas. So I'd be willing to give Colwill another try as a wide centre-back. But if it doesn't work, and yeah, you need to find another way to do it, Colwill as the centre-back's interesting. The only thing is you probably don't want... I mean, to be fair, I was about to say you probably don't want Gusto inverting, but...
He did in pre-season and he looked fantastic. I got it.
Yeah, I was about to say, there doesn't seem to be an area he looks weak, to be honest. So
Gusto's a weird player, isn't he? Like, he should be talked about the Ballon d'Or. I've never seen him try anything and not be decent at it. Like, he played left back and inverted into midfield. Never seen him do that ever. And all of a sudden, he was just amazing from day dot. And every other player, like, yeah, I'll give him time, adapting to a new position. That doesn't apply to Malagusto, apparently. Although you would know this, but I didn't know this. I found out recently that Gusto actually came through Lyon's academy in midfield rather than always being a fullback, which I didn't know. So that would maybe explain why he finds it easier to slot into this inverted role, I guess.
It's so interesting, like just on him, like at Lyon, he was good. Like from his debut, you could tell he was great, but he always had a big issue. No, he always had problems defensively. Like that was clearly his weakness. He was great going forward, and it's so weird how he's had like the opposite curve at Chelsea, where he started off great defensively, not so good going forward, and he's slowly developed that attacking side. He's a great player, but
it really is good.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to configure. I think you can like use this setup as like Cucurella, sort of the wide centre back, but I feel like Chelsea have tried that before and it hasn't worked as well. To be honest, I think Cucurella is better in midfield because he's quite secure on the ball, but he's not necessarily good at breaking the lines of his passes. So yeah. I think he.
I just think you're wasting Gusto if you're putting him in the back three.
Well, yeah, this is the point. If we're saying this is for a team again, if this is playing against weaker teams, then I think you're allowed to do this because Gusto should have more license to carry forward against.
Okay, so against weaker teams, you're thinking more. You put Cucurella in the back. You let either Gusto invert, or you do what we did against Inter and let him almost be in a wide area.
Wait, I say you let Cucurella invert, and you just give Gusto that license to drive forward from right centre back.
I see what you're saying. So then essentially leave only two, let Gusto go, and then have these have two sets of two in front of each other, I guess.
Yeah, the way it would balance out is like, say you're going forward and the ball's on the right-hand side like this, you'd probably have Caicedo drop back a bit. So then
and I guess you then have Palmer as the right winger who comes inside and then Gusto has the wide space.
Yeah. You can, there's lots of ways to configure this. Like Chelsea have got a lot of players, but I think there's a lot of ways you can configure this setup to get like a nice balanced sheet. So
that's what I find so difficult, though. I'm not sure about you, and obviously that's partly why I'm so excited for the season, to just see what we're going to do. Because, like you said, we have so many options, so many different ways of doing things that I'm just really looking forward to. How is he actually going to do it? And I know the first game doesn't tell us everything about that, and there's still potentially some new signings coming in and whatever. But yeah, I'm really intrigued. And you know how you said earlier, you don't think it matters so much that whether Maresca's little experience that he does have, whether that came in the championship or elsewhere, isn't that relevant. Why I said it's relevant, or why I think it's relevant to me, is because if he was at Man City or at PSG at one season, that would almost be similar. Sure, more difficult oppositions, but you're going into the season fully expecting to win, and most of the time you do win. So then, he never went through this like bad spell. Everybody turning, your form is going out the window, everybody's getting injured, you can't get a win to save your life. He hasn't had this, how do I get my team out of this negative downward spiral? And at Chelsea, we have that every season, at least at one point, usually multiple points, usually in November, and then once again after Christmas. And then we usually find our feet from March to the end of the season. But this season, we have a slightly favorable November fixture list, so maybe November will be better for once. But that's the part I worry about. And that's why I'm like, you have so many options. Will he, being this tactically minded manager, will he overthink it and almost like have so many options and try too much? You know, that's partly why I was like, okay, he's a rigid manager, does what he does all the time. As much as I said earlier, I like that he can be adaptable. I also think it's important, because I said this for Sarri. It's like, what's the point in working on a plan B before you've even perfected your plan A? What's the point in having 4 different plans that you're all okay at, but you're not good at any of them? But if you have so many options and so many variations, okay, you put Enzo as the 6, or you put Lavia as the 6, or you put Caicedo as the 6, or you play Jackson, or you're playing Kunku, and then maybe you're playing Kunku as a winger once, completely different style of winger to play Mudryk or Neto, or you play Palmer right wing, or you have Neto or Madueke, again, completely different style of wingers. And then sometimes Gusto inverts, sometimes he plays winger, sometimes he plays centre back. There's so many. That's the, like, I'm worried, when will it, will we not overdo it with like this option, rather than that actually, you know,
I think this is why
to do it.
I think this is why Maresca's working, like, from what we've seen in possession, it's been just about the structure, right? It's why Chelsea have been so rigid. And I think the idea is that he's probably aware he's got so many options, and Chelsea are probably going to end the season with like the most different lineups across the season, right? Like, they're probably not going to name the same lineup more than 5 or 6 times. And I think the idea would be, if I was putting myself in his shoes, it would be get everyone to understand the system and where everyone needs to be and what their role should be, so you can interchange those players. Like, Enzo Fernandez dropping into the 6 doesn't have to change the whole team's complexion because he knows what that 6 should be doing, or that the 6 should be doing, and he should just be able to slot in. So it's more about the players adapting to the system rather than adapting his system every time depending on the players who he's got. I think there'll be marginal things, obviously. Like Mudryk, you'd have him as like a touchline player. If you played on Nkunku off the wing, you probably have more as an inside player, right? But broadly, there's going to be principles for each position and like certain rules that I'd imagine don't change. And that will be key to making sure Chelsea don't just become, as you kind of hinted, a convoluted mess.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. My worry is just when one player, one game does this role, which is that role will always be the same. But if the one player plays multiple different roles across multiple different games, like you touched on, and Nkunku has to do something completely different because if he plays him up front, then he has to get used to playing up front alone for the first time ever, because that's not what he's done at Leipzig. Completely, aside from the fact that he didn't play at all last season, so just needs to get used to playing in the Prem anyway, aside from getting used to his position. Something interesting, I'm not sure if you saw it potentially earlier. Connor tweeted just his perspective on what he thinks Chelsea should be doing tomorrow. And I'd just be interested to see what you think about it, because don't have Connor here, but from one tactic to another, I always think it's very interesting to hear people that know what they're talking about, but still different people always will have slightly different opinions. So where do you stand on, obviously this is what it looks like in possession in his mind, and Enzo and Lavia double pivot, Cucurella and Fofana. I guess he did think of Dewsbury Hall, so well done you, Connor. But he has Gusto out wide. Do you think he's gone crazy here? Do you think this could happen? What do you reckon?
Okay, so I kind of like the structure he's gone for. Like he's trying to match City 4v4. I think Connor's thinking, how can we make him suffer in transition? The only thing is, I probably wouldn't be starting. I'm not sure I would be starting KDH, Lavia, and Enzo all together in midfield. I think you want Caicedo in there to make sure you win the duels. Even if Rodri isn't playing, that feels like a team that feels like a Chelsea side that's quite vulnerable in transition. And what we've seen, there was a great tweet from CFC Central. It was Maresca says something like, "Oh, I didn't expect us to be this high or something." And
it was essentially blaming Poch last season for us not being
no, something else. It was like he was just asked generally like how Chelsea are, and he said, "Oh, they're ahead of where I expect them to be." And CFC Central replied, "Is he talking about the defensive line?" Which was world class. And like to set up my point against Erling Haaland, I don't think you want to be a team that's vulnerable in transition. So I think the tweaks I made to Connor's approach, I get it. I think I like the in possession style. I'd just be worried about KDH. I'd probably be changing him for Moises Caicedo and making Chelsea a bit more strong in midfield. Sterling on
the thing is just
interesting.
I can only go by what I've seen so far in preseason, and judging by what I've seen so far in preseason, if he does pick goal 3, Enzo will be the one that's in the 8 and not Caicedo. Like, I mean, sure, maybe he shocks me and does something that he hasn't done all of preseason, does it in the first time in a game, but that would feel like Thomas Tuchel just before he got sacked, when all of a sudden in preseason he started playing fullback formations, only to go to the first game of the season and be back to the back 3. I'm like, so why on earth did you work on it in the preseason then? Or the other way around, you do like what you always did in preseason, first game of the season, play a completely different system. And I'm like, what was the whole point of preseason then? To try what you wanted to do in the first game. So this is what I'd fear if he all of a sudden did play Enzo as the 6. Enzo hasn't been around for much of preseason anyway because of Copa America and joining late and stuff. But if he'd all of a sudden be doing that for the first time, I don't know quite how ready he'd be for it. Do you know what I mean? Or do you just think he's that good, he'll be fine?
Well, how many games did Fernandez play? Didn't he only play a couple of preseason games, to be fair?
I think he played 3 in total.
Okay, 3, to be fair. It's a little more unexpected.
He played Inter Madrid. Let me check if he played City. Maybe it was just 2.
There's 2 ways to think about it. I'm thinking more from a defensive side, right? Like a defensive angle. I think to critique my own way and like to back Connor's, I guess, like the reason you might have KDH is, so as he's kind of shown, he'd have Nkunku dropping off the defensive line like for Kanji. And what Nkunku's great at, and this is why I actually think he'd be good for Maresca, because Maresca did a similar thing with Daka, is having his striker drop into midfield and creating a lot of space to be exploited, a little like a false 9. And I feel like with an Enzo Fernandez and Caicedo as 2 8s, I guess, or like, them 2 plus Lavia in midfield, don't think either any of those players are well suited to be exploiting the space and Nkunku creates in behind. Whereas KDH might be a bit better because he's a bit more attack minded. So that's the other side to it. I really think this just depends on how conservative you think you should set up against City. I'd say Connor's setup is to try and win. I'd be trying to set up to not lose.
Yeah, which is somewhat reasonable. I can't lie. It is somewhat reasonable. Unless you want to add a few other things to, what Chelsea should be doing or what you think Chelsea will be doing. I want to get back to a topic that we were kind of slightly touching on earlier, but then didn't quite follow through with it. Let me just see where I have the biggest and main tweet about what I'm talking about. Now, I guess there's two. First, we have... through Pice, but via Fabrizio Romano, the information that the agreement is now getting really close between Chelsea and Atletico Madrid for Joao Felix and Gallagher. You wanted to say something earlier. What do you think?
Like I said, don't know how true it is, but one hand, I don't think Conor Gallagher is well suited to Enzo Maresca's system. And you know that meme of the guy standing up in the room, everyone else is sitting down? I think Chelsea have been fair with Gallagher to an extent. He's probably not suited to the system. He's got a year left in his contract. Can kind of see where they're forcing him out. May feel a bit mean, but I kind of get it. What I don't get is signing Joao Felix. As someone, I think I was...
Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, in my opinion, but sure.
Well,
I've also watched us in preseason and felt the one thing we're missing is the legs of Gallagher. Because every time I've watched Dewsbury Hall play, he looked slow as shit. It looked like I had Jorginho back. And I'm like, I miss Gallagher's pace by trying to press, man.
Well, listen to Dewsbury Hall, he brings out... I guess he's one of Maresca's lieutenants. And I quite liked him in the Premier League, so I'm open to seeing how he gets on, to be honest. Right. But I think I've been on this channel before and spoken about how I like Joao Felix. And I thought he was actually pretty fine in his first spell at Chelsea. Yeah. Don't understand why. I have no defense for signing him, to be honest. This time a week ago or a couple of weeks ago, I was really strong on defending Chelsea, just in terms, like I said, everyone's finding it easy to laugh at them. Then they go and get linked to Joao Felix, and it's like, right, I don't understand how you can necessarily back this. Like, I think a lot of my analysis of Chelsea and just in general relies on the idea that people who work in football clubs are smart. I believe the two sports directors Chelsea have are competent, experienced professionals, and while their strategy hasn't been perfect, they have got one. It's moves like this that make it difficult to have that view. Joao Felix, as I said, he's too similar to Nkunku, doesn't have a clean fit in the team. Yeah,
because you can touch on what you would have thought of Samuel Omorodion, whatever may have happened with that deal, whether it's a failed medical, whether it's Chelsea trying to back out and trying to play Atletico only to get reverse gangbanged instead. Because 50 million euros plus 55 million, what?
Oh, God.
Sorry? And it's like, are you that desperate to get rid of Gallagher to add another player who doesn't really fit in the team? Because I understand what you said about Gallagher. It doesn't really suit Maresca ball and everything else, blah, blah, blah. But and I'm not saying Joao Felix doesn't suit Maresca ball, but does Joao Felix suit our squad, fill our squad? He's not really... tell me what you think, but I don't see him really as a winger, so I wouldn't want him as a left winger the whole time, even if some people could tell you he's better than Sterling and Mudryk, and maybe he is, but that still doesn't make him a winger. Do you know what I mean? Just because you've got a bad tooth doesn't make it better if you put a bad tooth from somebody else in. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't make it a good tooth. Still a bad left winger then. If up front, you wouldn't want Joao Felix up front. And we touched on it there. How many games will you have where you'll play Joao Felix as a 10 or an 8, whatever you want to look at it, instead of Nkunku? Are we going to sign Joao Felix for 50 million to play Conference League? I don't get the point.
Yeah, I just think I think he's a worse than Nkunku. I think they're very, very similar profiles. I just think Nkunku's probably... And, this is the thing. Everyone has said that he's similar to Nkunku. We've just kind of discussed, Nkunku doesn't have a necessarily clean fit in this Chelsea setup.
Exactly. Even Nkunku's already a struggle on his own.
Yeah, so you're signing another player who's got the same problems than Nkunku. This signing only makes sense if Nkunku does really well and has the role he has works, and then he gets a long-term injury.
Yeah, literally.
I don't understand. Joao Felix as well. Like I said, I think he's a really talented player, but he struggled at Barcelona last season. Atletico, I feel like, will be super happy to get rid of him. He's just
Of
kind of been
course.
he's been a problem for them, and this is them getting rid of him.
Exactly. That's my whole issue with the whole thing. And on that note, would you have rated Samuel Omorodion? Like, what would you have made of him? Obviously, at least he would have been the type of player that we were lacking. We were lacking that kind of physical focal point box threat striker, which he would have been. Now, whether he's good enough is a different question. But at least stylistically, profile-wise, he would have fit the squad. So purely on that, from that point of view, I would have probably preferred that to Joao Felix. Also, it would have been cheaper than Joao Felix. So, I mean, what do you know of, or what do you make of Samuel Omorodion, bro?
I don't know too much of him, but I wouldn't have been particularly keen on that move either. I feel like if you're signing a striker, it needs to be Osimhen level, because what's the point of... I think Nicholas Jackson's really good. Like, Marc Guiu, like, interesting prospect. I don't really see the point of throwing another prospect in there who's just going to battle them for minutes.
I get that. Can I just to throw a bit of a counterpoint out there, and I'm even in my own mind, I'm not really sure which side of that fence I sit on, because part of me agrees with exactly what you said. If we're going to sign a striker, you need to level up and you need to, improve us essentially. And also don't add another young one, but also we know that they're only going to add young ones. So that's almost kind of besides the point. But I'm also thinking, after what Jackson did last season, after the first season he had, if you now buy a striker to play ahead of Jackson and essentially make Jackson the backup to only play in the Conference League, what is the point? Isn't that?
No, I'm with you. I'm not saying buy a striker. I'm just, if you buy one, it should be an Osimhen level.
Okay, I hear you. Because that's my thing. I'm like, if your whole strategy is to buy young players, when they have, especially like, even if they don't have a great first season, you shouldn't put someone ahead of them after one season. But if they have a really good first season like Jackson did, if you then put someone ahead of him, what was the whole point in buying him? Like, then stop buying young players, just buy ones that are 27, 28, and then you can do that, no problem. But if you're buying players that are 22, other than Haaland and Mbappe, how many strikers were great strikers at 22? Michael Owen. How many? They all turn into great strikers once they hit 25, 26. Look at Solanke. Look at even Havertz. You can see that he's getting better with age. Like, it's normal for any striker. Like, obviously, there's the exceptions like Haaland, like Mbappe, but they're just freaks. But still, this logic applies to most others. Look at Drogba. He was, first of all, joined us at 24, 25, wasn't great in his first season, and then he turned into one of the best strikers in the league. But he wouldn't have been that if we signed him at 21 and after the first season said, okay, now we're buying Anelka to play instead of you rather than with you. That wouldn't have worked. Then Drogba would have never been a player he would have been. And it just feels like if we're buying these young players and kind of banking on their potential, if you then don't let the potential play out, like, especially as a fan, it's just like, who am I supposed to attach to, man? Like, which one? Like, who are these players that I'm supposed to be liking here? Because who knows what you're going to do. Next season, they're probably going to buy Declan Rice to play ahead of Caicedo. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. That's what it feels like. But I get what you say. So you don't even think we should be buying a striker. You think Jackson and Kunku, if you need to, and Guiu is enough.
Yeah, and you've got, like, David Washington or whatever his name is, a couple of others on the books. Oh, okay, they don't count. But like long term, they will count.
I don't watch under 21s, but I've been told he wasn't even good in our under 21s. So I'm like, what are you doing in the first team?
Fair enough. Yeah, I just don't think a striker is. I get. Yeah, if you're buying a striker, it should be like a game changer. If it's not a game changer, kind of what's the point?
Yeah. No, I hear that as well. But yeah, I mean, Joao Felix, if it happened, like, of course I'm going to support him as a Chelsea fan if it does happen. And like you, I don't think he was bad. Now, does 4 goals and 0 assists look brilliant in that 6 months or 4 months, 5 months that he had here? Obviously, he managed to get himself sent off in his first game and then was suspended for 3 games. So, that obviously limited his whole stint here anyway. But he's a player who Atletico Madrid have been trying to get rid of for 4 years, who was at Barcelona essentially most of the time sitting on a bench. And when he did start, not really working because Barcelona also didn't really know what position to play him in. They played him on the wing, didn't really work. Played him somewhere else, didn't really work. Why are you doing that? It purely feels like, okay, we're so desperate to get rid of Gallagher, we're willing to do whatever. And that just, how you said you think they were being fair on Gallagher. I don't think asking him to leave because he doesn't suit the manager is necessarily the wrong bit. I think how you go about it is the wrong bit. First of all, that they try to paint him as the villain in the media, just like they did to Mason Mount we offered him a contract. Yeah, but he's a 24-year-old player. Which 24-year-old signs a 2+1 year deal after the best season of their career? None do that. That contract offer is a fuck you, and like here's the door. That's what the contract offer is. It's not an offer to sign. It's an offer to see. This is how little we value you. And I just think, why paint him as the villain into the fan? And obviously because we have idiotic fans, they fall for it. That's the second part. But I can't control the masses. But I would hope that the club doesn't act like a bunch of idiots. And I just don't get why you are so desperate to get rid of him to sign Joao Felix. It doesn't suit the squad. I just don't get it. Again, doesn't suit the play style. Doesn't suit the squad, because I think in principle it could work. If we didn't have Nkunku, I would maybe even be in favor of this. But we do have Nkunku, and I don't need Joao Felix for the Conference League. I could just play Carney Chukwuemeka, who we're probably going to sign if we sign Joao Felix. I don't know what you think of Carney Chukwuemeka, but that's at least where I stand on it. In terms of other transfer news, there's not much going on. So there's a weird one by Paul Joyce. Who does he work for? Do you know Paul Joyce? The Times, supposedly. Apparently, Chelsea have shown an interest in Joe Gomez. Thoughts?
Weird one. Yeah, I don't really get that.
Another injury-prone player, so that's good.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on that. It just feels a bit unnecessary.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to bring up one last thing that was kind of making the rounds yesterday in particular. Where do I find it? So this is, I'm not sure if you've even seen it, Alex. I assume you have, but maybe you haven't. So this is what Enzo Maresca said about Ben Chilwell. He said, Ben Chilwell said to leave Chelsea, as Maresca has confirmed. It's probably better he goes and leaves and finds minutes. I love the way he is. The problem is that he's struggling to find the right position with us. First of all, where do you stand on a player or on a manager saying, okay, after 3 weeks of preseason, okay, you don't have a position, so even though you're vice captain, you need to leave? But also, where does Chile go? Like, because I kind of agree with him. I don't see what position he has, unless where you play a wing back. A top team shouldn't have Ben Chilwell in their team as a starter. So, and if we're not going to play wing backs, what is the point? I don't really see it. He's also never fit, like really never fit. But my worry is like, who's going to take his wages? He's on fairly big wages. He only signed a contract, by the way, in April 2023. Of these new sport directors gave him that new contract, not the old ones. These current sport directors gave him that new contract. Now, sure, that might have been a contract that limits that actually reduces the base salary but gives higher bonuses. Maybe that's partly why it happened, because obviously reducing the wage bill has always been their biggest task, I suppose. But yeah, where do you stand on what was said on Chile, and where does Chile go?
I think I like the idea. Chelsea trying to get rid of Chilwell, to be honest. I don't think he has a good fit in the team. I also think he's kind of declined over the recent years. Like, defensively, does not seem particularly strong. I think there's a reason why he wasn't injured, was he, for the Euros, and Gareth Southgate still didn't take him, and I kind of understand why.
I don't know what the definition of injured is for Ben Chilwell, because he's just been injured almost permanently for 2.5 seasons. So
he's got Reece James-itis.
Exactly. So he might not have been injured, but he certainly wasn't fit to play football at the tournament, I don't think.
Right, got you. Yes,
whatever.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. It kind of only makes sense if he's going to play wing back somewhere, because he is pretty good going forward. Yeah. But this feels a little desperate from Maresca and Chelsea to be saying that, because it just feels like you're lowering his value. Now everyone knows. Now everyone knows you're trying to get rid of him.
Not including him in the squad in preseason games. Already told you that as well, like whether he says it or not. Like,
you could at least come up with an excuse for that, right? But that puts it in black and white. Just we don't need him, so now clubs are probably going to come in for a low fee. And to be honest, Chelsea will probably have to sell quite a lot of players anyway, right? Because you've got quite a few.
Hundreds. But like then that's the next weird thing. So Trevor Chalobah, not allowed to train with the first team, forced out. Conor Gallagher, not allowed to train with the first team, forced out. Ben Chilwell, forced out, but still allowed to train with the first team.
Interesting.
So why are we treating players differently? I know he's vice captain and everything, but still, I don't really get it. For me, now that Luke Shaw's injured again, the only potential destination who would pay so much that Chelsea would be happy with it, I see, is Manchester United. Do you see them doing that?
I don't think they're that stupid anymore.
Shit. there was a report a few weeks ago that they were interested, but obviously it wasn't necessarily the most serious report. Because like you say, why would they get another injury-prone English left back? I guess they could think one of them's going to be fit. Do you know what I mean? Maybe that's the logic if we sign Joe Gomez. One of Fofana and Gomez is going to be fit. Do you know what I mean? You just need to have two. But yeah, I don't really make much of it. Alex, I think a good way to end this stream out, well, I guess there is something to mention. Ugo Chukwu went out on loan to Southampton. I don't know how much you've seen of Ugo Chukwu. He actually looked pretty decent in preseason when he got minutes. The only thing if one of Lavia or Caicedo gets injured, or Enzo, I guess, if you still consider Enzo as one of the sixes. I just haven't quite seen it yet from Maresca. Then who plays? Like, sure, while Calabria and Caicedo are fit, no problem. But if one of them gets injured, and at Chelsea that is possible, then what? Like, sure, we signed Renato Veiga. I'm not sure how much you know about him. Obviously, the guy we signed from Basel, who's left-sided centre-back, left-back, but supposedly, first and foremost, a DM. Even though when you look at him, he looks like the most blatant centre-back you've ever seen. And he looks like a decent centre-back. Can pass cars, he's quite quick, good in a tackle. From what I've seen pre-season, I'm not too mad for 40 million euros. But as a DM, I don't know about that, man. So, yeah, that's the only my concern about Ugo Chukwu to Southampton. But do you think it's a good loan for him at all?
Yeah, I think it's a good loan for him. With Caicedo and Lavia there in defensive midfield, I feel like that's enough depth to last you. But like, it's to a point as well that you don't want to just keep Ugo Chukwu as a third choice because then he's just not playing at all. So it's a tough choice, but I can see why you want to put him on loan. Southampton is an interesting team to go to. I haven't got much high hopes for them this season.
Because do you fear a bit of a Billy Gilmore at Norwich loan situation? Because he was great for Chelsea. All of a sudden, we loaned him out, and then his team was just so bad that he couldn't even look good if he tried.
I think Ugo Chukwu would be better because I think he shines more defensively than on the ball, whereas Billy Gilmore was kind of the opposite, right? So like Norwich was just a bad fit from the start.
Yeah, fair enough. But on the last note, which I would find quite interesting. Now, last time when we did this, we did a whole big Premier League prediction stream the other day. And we did a whole like the Potmore predictor, which now is apparently only available on the app. Don't know why. So now we're going to do it as the tier list.
Excellent. This is much better than the position by position.
Exactly. But I would like to go from bottom to top. I think that's a bit more interesting.
Ooh.
So why don't you tell me your 3 relegated teams in order?
Okay. In order. Okay, I'm going in order. Southampton.
You don't have to if you really don't want to, but
I'll not go in order near the top. I can go in order at the bottom. Southampton bottom.
Okay.
Nottingham Forest 19th.
Okay.
And Brentford 18th.
Brentford 18th. This is funny now. Obviously, I've already done this. So what do you reckon I put as my bottom 3? How would you know? But...
the 3 promoted sides.
Nearly. I went Southampton, Leicester, Forest, and I kept Ipswich up.
Oh, fun. I'm also keeping Ipswich up.
Yeah, the guys on the stream actually convinced me because they're like, well, all the others change manager. Well, I'm not sure about Southampton, actually. But Southampton, they didn't look even great in the Championship. So what hope do they have, realistically, right? But Ipswich kept the manager. Well, Leicester went from Maresca to Steve Cooper. So I don't think that's going to go well. I can't lie. But you kept them up. So what makes you say that?
I disagree. I quite like Steve Cooper. And I think Nottingham Forest doesn't seem like a stable place to work.
No, I agree.
He didn't seem to get on well with the owner. So, like, to be honest, I feel like Steve Cooper's a good manager. If he didn't do well in a stable working environment, he'll probably do quite well in a better working environment. So I kind of back him. I feel like Leicester will be fine.
Fair dues. What makes you put Brentford in relegation zone, bro?
I think they're a couple inches away from just like seriously getting in trouble. And their performances were better than their results last year, but I think by now as a team, they should be transitioning to a more like sustainable way of playing, a sustainable way of football. And yeah, I just think, they're on the precipice, and they've got Tony. If he stays, even if he does stay, I don't know how motivated he is at the moment. He seems to really want that top 6 move. Yeah. I just don't. I'm not particularly high on them. I think this is the year when they dip.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, I don't know. I didn't put them there, but it's difficult for me to. I don't know what to do with Brentford. Like you say, if Tony stays, maybe, but how can he be bothered? But also, if he goes, you'd assume they get a decent chunk of money. So who do they replace him with? I guess that is also relevant. But yeah, fair enough. That's your bottom 3, as it's called on this tier list. Lower mid-table. Which 5 are you putting in that group?
We'll put, in no particular order, Ipswich and Leicester.
I just need to bloody find the Ipswich badge. There it is. Ipswich and Leicester. Okay.
And Everton and Fulham.
Are you at all including potential points deductions in these, or is this purely on sporting merit?
Purely on sporting merit. Okay. Good check. Yes, good check. Fulham. Fulham as well. And Wolves. That's my final one, yeah.
Do you want to give it a rough order where you're like sure, like do you think maybe?
Yeah, I'd probably have
end,
Leicester towards the bottom end, followed by Fulham, who I think are getting overrated a lot.
Oh,
and
really?
then
Interesting.
and then I like it from there.
Fair dues. Fair dues. I mean, do you think losing Pedro Neto will harm Wolves drastically or not so much?
No, because he didn't play last season.
Anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
that was my question. Yeah, there you go. Next 5 then, which I wish they just did 7 and 8 together because I feel because this 8th is part of it's almost like a big 8 now, kind of.
Yeah, you're asking me to pick 7th.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could change it, couldn't I? But
it's fine.
I would just go with it how it is. So which would be your next 5 in that higher mid-table?
Again, in no particular order for now, I'd have Bournemouth and Brighton.
Sure.
As well as Crystal Palace.
Sure.
And West Ham. I think that's
12,
11, 10, 9. Oh, yeah, one more.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Spurs is kind of invisible down here, by the way. I'm not saying you want them, but they're difficult to see.
Oh, good. How many people have you got watching the stream?
Not that many at the moment. 93.
Okay, I'm safe. Manchester United.
That is good. Is that based off yesterday or based off other things?
Ten Hag it's based off. I think they've got a good squad, but they finished last season with one of the worst expected goals against in Europe, and the excuse was injury problems, and those injury problems don't seem to have gone away. Also, in terms of their recruitment, I quite like the Delict. I think that's fine. Mazraoui, as I said, I think he's very injury prone, so I'll be surprised if he even plays significant minutes. They've signed Lenny Yoro, who has started injured and is a rotational player. And Xerxes did score yesterday. That was impressive. But as kind of other, there's some good people in Man United fan space. The Devils in the Detail podcast are a good one to check out. Kind of feel like Xerxes not going to be very impactful. They're also quite low on Ten Hag. So I've got United finishing, I'd have them 8th.
Fair dues. 8th. I mean, if they're 8th, means we can't be. So I'll take it. What I quickly wanted to touch on, what about Bournemouth? Because obviously they've lost Dom Solanke now, which obviously was their main goal threat, their main goal getter. How much do you think that impacts them? Where would you put them? Would you put them more towards the end or the middle of this kind of 5 here? Where would you put them, especially losing Solanke, like I say?
Probably near the end, but that's not necessarily a negative thing. I think I'm put Bournemouth high more because Andoni Iraola, they've got a really good coach. And I'll be honest, placing them high, Solanke didn't even come into my thinking. I think they'll be just fine without him. Fair
dues. Do you want to give these guys an order? Where would you put Brighton? I don't know. What did Brighton surprise you today? I mean, I didn't watch the game, but no, 3-0 at Goodison. I know Everton had a man sent off, but still, it seems like a strong result on your first day, with the youngest Premier League manager ever.
I'm quite high on Fabian Herzler. He seems like quite a fun manager. I think they'll start the season well, and then once his ideas kind of get found out, they'll finish a bit lower. Okay. So I'd have Brighton probably the highest there. To be honest, I quite like that order.
Okay. See, I am expecting quite a lot from Palace this season. Obviously, Oliver Glasner's Austrian, so maybe I'm slightly biased there. But I feel like that could go quite well. I know obviously they lost to Lise, but I feel like if Mateta plays even close to what he did towards the end of last season, they're going to be flying. But this whole kind of between 7th and 9th is so tight, like West Ham and maybe Brighton, maybe Palace. I think they're all it's so difficult to judge where each of them are going to fit.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I think Palace will be good under Robert Glasner. I kind of feel the same in terms of I think they're going to end the season quite slow. I think they'll start quite high, but I think when teams start giving them more respect and sitting deep, Palace will start to struggle.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, only one team in the Europa Conference League tier finishing 7th. Who do you have finishing 7th?
Aston Villa.
That seems reasonable. Although watching the game today, I don't think there's that much between Villa and West Ham. I can't lie. And yeah, I don't know. I like Fulcook, so I hope they do well.
Yes. Then we've got the... I haven't got much to say on Villa. I like their recruitment. I think they'll do well. But after that, then we're going Europa League, so 5th and
6th. You're picking Newcastle and Spurs, aren't you? Because you said earlier Chelsea are 4th for you, so...
Yes, I am, yeah.
Do you have an order of these two?
I I think you need to change him, to be honest. I think Spurs. I hope for Spurs' sake that they do quite well in the Europa League this year. That'll be good fun for them. And Ange Postecoglou, I'm a big fan of.
I hope they get to the final and lose it.
Now, of course you do.
But yeah, I mean, Newcastle, surely because they're now not in in any European competitions, while they last season kind of built their squad to be kind of ready for that. I think that in itself surely should mean they have a good season. But then again, we didn't have Europe last season, and we didn't realize that was a benefit until the last 3 weeks of the season either. Though, make up that what you will. But yeah, top 4 then. I assume you're putting us 4th, or do you reckon Liverpool under Arne Slot have a bit of a dip?
No, I think I was thinking that at first, but I'm getting higher on Arne Slot. So I think Liverpool 3rd, and they finished further ahead of Chelsea. Like Chelsea be closer to 5th than they are to 3rd.
Yeah.
And then
who's winning the title? Wait,
it's really tough because for a moment this week I was thinking Arsenal, but I feel like they need to recruit a little more. They've not done enough for me to go against.
What do you think they need? Like, what kind of player?
They need. I think they need another number 8, or like someone to balance out Ødegaard, someone to fix their. They're still quite reliant on their right hand side. I think Calafiori is a great addition. It's one of my favourite signings of the summer. I feel like they just need another attacker. Personally, I'm convinced they can win a title with Kai Havertz and Jesus up front. So I'd have them clear 2nd again. But not reaching 1st. The incumbent will be Manchester City.
Fair dues. It's an interesting one. Like, just to quickly touch on Liverpool, obviously they've looked good in pre-season. They looked pretty good today. Of course, they played a promoted team, so maybe take it with a slight pinch of salt. And I know in the first half, I didn't manage to catch all of the first half, but I watched kind of the halftime show basically, and the whatever I was watching in Sky Germany, they were talking about Ipswich was arguably the better team in the first half. I'm not sure if that's true, but that's what they said. But where do you stand on honestly? Because obviously, I think, was it last year when we hired Poch? Yeah, I think so. When we hired Poch, we were also linked to Arne Slot. I'm not sure. In the end, it was said that he said no to us after Bowley already flew him around in his private jet. Who knows whether that's true or whether we decided against him. What do you make of Arne Slot? And because if he just comfortably finishes 3rd, I think that's an unbelievable achievement, because I cannot remember many examples of a year-long manager, like 8-9 years, like Klopp was, leaving, and the next guy just taking over as if nothing happened. I'm not even sure if I can think of one example of that happening before. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't happen, but if he does, I would find that very surprisingly impressive.
I think the difference would be, think of Man United when they lost Ferguson, they brought in Moyes. I mean, I can't remember it super well, but if I remember rightly, like the structure of the pitch had already kind of fallen apart a bit, and when Moyes came in, the
squad kind of fell apart a year or two before, and Fergie just stayed on and kind of saved it for a bit.
Yeah, and when Ferguson left, it was like that was everything. He was dictating everything to Man United. Liverpool structure's spot on, like from their backroom staff that Slot's brought in, they've got really good reputations to like Richard Hughes and Michael Edwards as well, like above him. Everything's just a really smooth operation there. So I kind of feel like they'll be able to keep the ship sort of together.
Fair dues. Yeah, I mean, like I say, I find it quite impressive. I have a little hope that they maybe drop out of top 4 just to make it a bit easier for us, but I don't quite know how realistic that is. Alex, I want to finish this off, because we are about to finish this off, with a little score prediction for Chelsea versus Manchester City tomorrow. And I would like for you to give it your most honest, truest, and realistic prediction you could come up with. Oh, you muted yourself?
So I've got my cat running around below.
All good.
I've got, I said earlier it was 50-50 between Chelsea like losing 3 or 4-0 or like a conservative game. I'll go conservative. I think I'll go 1-1.
I mean, I'll take a 1-1. We have a lot of 1-1 opening days. Not sure if you remember last season's first game was against Liverpool, also finished 1-1. We also, this is, I think, what is it, the 3rd for opening game in a row where Anthony Taylor is the referee.
How grow up, you.
No, don't grab me. Grab Anthony Taylor. Bloody, I hate him. But yeah, what am I going to say? Now, obviously, I can sit here and say 2-1 Chelsea. Do I really believe that? No. I'm feeling like a 2 or 3-1 City. I hope we get a goal, because it's important to like break the deadlock. Like, you don't want to go into second game. Oh, we haven't scored yet. You know, at least it's something. But you've seen, you said you watched our preseason games back. as much as we can blame the pitches on these American football, these American football stadiums, we made these exact kind of silly passing mistakes at the back last season on the best pitches in the Premier League. So don't you be blaming those pitches in America for that. I expect those very same errors to keep happening at least once or twice a game. And when you play City, Haaland usually punishes you. Now, sure, against other teams, they might miss it. And then we still win 2-0 or whatever. But against City, if you make these kind of errors playing up from the back, I don't know. I just don't have much hope. I have one last question. Who do you think starts up front for Chelsea tomorrow? Do you think it will be Nkunku? Do you think it will be Jackson?
Good question. Let's go. The predicted lineup says Jackson, and that's generally right. So I'll go Jackson, but I really don't have a dog in that fight.
Yeah, no, fair dues. I mean, I would hope that if he is fully fit, that it is automatically Jackson that plays. But he only played one half since coming back from an injury towards the end of preseason. So maybe that one half isn't enough to start tomorrow. I don't know. I guess we've got Conference League qualification to give him minutes next week. Isn't that amazing?
Who are you playing?
Servette from Switzerland.
Good luck. You might need it.
Yeah, we might. After they lost to Braga. In the first leg, they drew. And then in the second leg, Braga won. So now we play the loser of that game because they played Europa League qualification and now they have to play us in Conference League qualification. Oh, my days. It's sad times. It's sad times. It's all because of American pitch, American owner, American company making football. I agree. Blame the Americans. No, obviously, I'm joking. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's about time we wrap this one up. So, Alex, first of all, very big thank you for coming back on. I appreciate it a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, please do check out all of Alex's links. I asked him before the stream, what would you like linked in the description? He said, well, I'm not really sure. And he said, I need to upload more on TikTok, so put the TikTok in the description. So check out Alex's TikTok. That will make him upload more TikTok. So do that. Obviously, check out his Twitter, check out his YouTube. All of them are linked down in the description below as well. And I'm sure if you follow his Twitter, you will see all of the relevant work for the Athletic as well. Alex, thank you very much for coming on. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in. I'm sorry that I didn't quite converse as much with the chat as maybe usual. I thought, let me focus on my conversation with Alex here, and we'll be back to taking a deep dive into what the chat has to say tomorrow when we analyze and react to Chelsea's, hopefully, successful opening game of the Premier League season against Manchester City. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button. Up the Chelsea. Upwards and onwards, and we will see you next time.